Let's start a new intuitive art journal, and this time we're going to work with mixed media. I'm curious about this paper to see how it holds up with the mixed media. I'm going to be using fluid acrylics, some acrylic ink, and watercolor for this piece. Now remember, with intuitive painting, we don't have a plan, and we're just going with whatever is happening in the moment. So I picked some colors ahead of time, but I didn't really go very far with this piece. I actually, to be completely honest with you, do not like the outcome of this piece. It's grown on me the more I've edited the video, but I still don't really feel connected to this piece, and I didn't feel super connected to the process either. But I wanted to be honest in these videos about my process, and I figured in the past I would have just thrown the video away or not shared it or just scrapped it, whatever. But I feel like now in this new era of my content creation, art sharing journey, I just want to share kind of all of it and be honest about what it actually looks like being a self-taught artist and working on art as someone who struggles with perfectionism and being too hard on myself and feeling like 90% of the time I actually don't like what I create, even though what you see, you might think, oh, she must love everything she does. It must be nice. No, like people comment all the time that I'm so talented, and 99% of the time I feel like I am a shit artist, if we're being completely honest. I am also a little sick right now, so my voice is extra nasally and raspy, so I apologize, but I really wanted to get this voiceover done so I could get this video up for y'all. I'm starting with the fluorescent pink, and I like to equate these intuitive paintings sometimes to sculpting because it honestly is like getting a rock and then carving in your art. And I kind of view the paper as the rock, and I carve in the painting with the paint. And those first strokes are so important because they inform so much about the rest of the piece. And even though with mixed media, it's really easy to cover up layers that you don't like and add to it over and over, there's still something about setting the tone with your painting with those first layers. The first marks for me are always the most meditative, and they tell me where I'm at with my muscle memory, how my movements are coming through on the page, what emotions might be coming through in my mark making, and it's a fun time in the beginning also to just experiment because that first layer will likely get covered up in a lot of ways. So this is where I might play with different techniques or even just kind of get lost in spreading the paint around, which is what actually happened with that layer. I was just enjoying spreading out the paint. And that's the beauty of the intuitive process, is that it's about the process. So if you're just enjoying spreading the paint and nothing's actually happening and you're not actually making anything in that moment, that's okay, because it's about being with the process and noticing when you get lost and you're thinking about something else during the process. Suddenly now you're thinking about, the meeting you have tomorrow or the thing you have to do in an hour, and being able to just bring yourself back to the movement of the paint with no expectation of what the outcome is going to be. It's truly, truly a wonderful way to practice meditation. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, it's a wonderful way to challenge the inner perfectionist. I had a comment from someone recently who asked about my moments of hesitation and those moments between strokes or major movements within the painting, and how I challenge the perfectionist during those moments of analyzing where I'm at with the intuitive painting. Because I think for a lot of us, we step back in those moments and we immediately let the inner critic take the stage. And the inner critic, especially if you went to art school or especially if you're used to being criticized or having criticism thrown your way, your inner critic might be really loud. And it takes the stage when we step back in those moments for those of us who are perfectionists, and it criticizes all of the things it feels like we should have done differently. It tells us we're shit artists. It gives us everything it can to convince us to quit so that we don't disappoint ourselves and actually realize how bad of an artist we are. But the trick is that for the perfectionist, it needs to trust that the intuitive process has a point. And so for me, it's been just a lot of practice. It was never just all of a sudden I was able to step back and paint intuitively. It was a constant challenge over and over again of noticing when the inner critic was taking over, identifying the tone, the language of the inner critic. Like, I've done a lot of therapy work for myself, not just as a therapist, but for my own therapeutic purposes, in identifying my inner parts and identifying how those inner parts show up in my creative process. And the inner critic was the first one I started with because the inner critic is the major antagonizer of the perfectionist. And like many of us, the perfectionist is the number one thing that gets in the way of me enjoying my creative process. So in the moments of pause between movements, The goal isn't to just be in this beautiful, fluffy, intuitive flow state. The goal is to notice. The goal is to just notice where you are in the moment of that intuitive intention and checking in with it. And so if you notice in those in-between moments that the inner critic is present, it's telling you, I don't know what to do. I'm going to mess it up. Whatever I do next is going to just ruin it. I don't want to ruin it. Whatever those checking statements are that check you, that keep you from getting outside of your comfort zone or doing the next thing. Checking in with those statements and saying, hey, I see you. I see you. Rather than resisting them and saying, why do I struggle with this perfectionist? Why are you here? Just saying, hey, I see you, perfectionist. I see that you don't want me to mess this up. But guess what? It's okay if I mess this up. And so in that moment where you find that inner critic is really present and prominent, you challenge it. And those are the times you'll see me get really random with my movement, because I realize, the perfectionist is here and it's way too present, and the inner critic is here and it's way too present. So I'm going to make a really dramatic movement to say, see, look, I made a dramatic movement and it didn't mess anything up. And if I hear the inner critic say, yes, you did, now it looks ugly, I continue to have that dialogue of, well, that's the point, to make messy art. This is for my journal. This isn't to sell. This is for no one but me. And so engaging with that inner critic in a way that doesn't cause it to ensnare and flare and get louder, but rather maybe causes it to reevaluate what it's doing in the first place and taking a step back. It's kind of like living with a dysfunctional family in your head at all times. And I work on this with my therapy clients, especially those who I'm doing internal family systems with, which is a type of therapy that works with a multiplicity of the mind, meaning it actually works with the idea that we have multiple parts internally kind of running the show at all times. If you've seen the movie Inside Out, it's very similar to that, where we have these parts that don't necessarily navigate certain feelings, but they navigate certain parts of ourselves that have developed as coping mechanisms to keep us safe in a unpredictable world. And the inner critic is one of those dysfunctional family members. And that part really has a very solid purpose in keeping you safe, and it wants to keep you really small because being seen is scary and vulnerable. Starting to slowly identify with the dysfunctional family members in your head. And so you have the inner critic, you have the different manager parts, different parts that are going to try to micromanage everything you do to keep you in line. We have firefighter parts that are super reactive, and they're going to try to put out fires by doing extreme things and feeling extreme things. In the case of art, a firefighter might say, stop painting. And the firefighter might be really present when you're in a creative block and you're not painting or doing anything creative at all, because it says, well, if you do anything, you're going to hate it. It's going to be awful and it's going to make you feel terrible. So you want to kind of be familiar with what parts are present during the process. And the more familiar you become with those parts, the easier it becomes to tap into self-energy. And self-energy is your intuition. And that's the main point of my therapeutic work with clients, is helping them access self-energy, helping them access who they are outside of that dysfunctional family that lives in their head, who they were before the world told them who to be, what to feel, what to think, how to create. And that self-energy is the energy you feel when you get lost in something and you're enjoying it and the time goes by and you look and you're like, holy crap, I didn't even realize I was doing that for this long. That is self-energy. That is intuition, and that is the goal. But if you're not there yet, it just means you're on your journey, and you have to keep coming back over and over again. Every time you attempt to paint intuitively and it becomes a stressful experience, you're one step closer to having it be a less stressful experience. But you have to keep coming back, and you have to trust yourself and your ability to evolve past this place of feeling not enough or blocked or uncreative. Get comfortable with making work you don't like. I did not like this. I don't know. It's given floral here. I had not intended to go in this direction. I wanted more color. I don't like that I'm limited to like a few colors here. I could have pushed it further, but I told myself if I pushed it further, then I would have engaged the inner critic too much, and I just let it go. And I am happy with what I've got for now. Maybe I'll add more later. That's the beauty of mixed media. If you liked this painting session, please like and subscribe and leave me comments and feedback. I love to hear from you and love to know what it is you want to learn from me. Thanks for joining.